I feel like it's a personal mission to change the narrative to the truth. I often say on the radio show, you have to imagine a world you want to live in and then create it. These two gentlemen are doing it, and they have been doing it and doing it well. Yes, they're in Brooklyn, though. Let me welcome to the show. He has the perfect name. His name is Kirk Goodrich. Come on now. President of Mona. Oh, well, you're going to have to tell me how to say this.
Monadnock Development.
Monadnock. Okay, we have to talk about this. Monadnock Development. And let me welcome someone I haven't seen in a while, but I've been watching him. Been to his church. He's amazing. Reverend David Brawley, pastor of St. Paul Community Baptist Church in Brooklyn. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Both of you, and I'm going to start with Mr. Goodrich. First of all, why Monadnock? Why that?
So the company was founded in the mid '70s, and it was named after the Monadnock Building in Chicago, which is an architecturally significant building. The founder of the company, Nick Limbo, is an architect by training and was fascinated by the building. So that's the origin of the name. Okay, and you were a baby then. So I can share my connection to the company is I got involved in affordable housing really as a teenager, inspired by the Nehemiah program in East New York and Brownsville. Didn't really know what was going on, but eventually studied affordable housing as a undergraduate at Cornell, and then eventually have spent my life doing affordable housing and got connected to Monadnock when I decided to go on my own as a developer more than 12 years ago. And they brought me in to really run their real estate development business. So I've been there almost 13 years now.
Okay. But it's really about you. And it's nice. I'm grateful that you have a place to go develop. I'm watching during the pandemic CBS Sunday Morning. That's my ritual. Actually, I get up on Sunday, may make me something to eat, and then I turn on Good Morning. I'm Jane Pauley,
right.
And this, yeah. So September 11th. I watched the whole thing, and then it gets to the end, the last like 10 minutes, and there you guys are talking about the Nehemiah Project and what you've done in the community. And I was like, how did I not know that? I think I was there at I came to one of your Ma'afa events, and you invited me to speak. I was horrible. So let me just say, you didn't remember it, Pastor Brawley. Tim Wise was there that week.
You're always phenomenal.
Yes, I've developed, right? So, but I remember being in awe because Tim Wise was just amazing. And I was like, this church is dope. Nicole Duncan Smith invited me. I met Ian, so cool. He's a bus driver, and his daughter. And I was like, this is the community. This is what it should look like to live in a community and have at the center somebody like you shepherding it through. And I know you ride on not the coattails, on the shoulders of a brilliant, amazing man. Tell us about your journey coming to St. Paul's.
Well, thank you again for this opportunity to share. Bishop Johnny Ray Youngblood, I believe, when I met him, he had such a vision and imagination for, I think, our people. And I think that that's what kind of drew me to his ministry. And I served with him for 15 years as his assistant, and now I've been serving as the lead pastor for the last 13 going on 14 years, trying to build off that legacy of prophetic community. You use the word community, and that just resonates so deeply for me. I think about the forebearers of our church who came from the South. We believe from South Carolina, 15 or so, who started St. Paul in Brownsville, as a matter of fact. And they wanted to create community up north. And I just found it so intriguing that they didn't call it St. Paul Baptist, but they called it St. Paul Community Baptist Church. And so what we attempt to do every single day is live into that identity. What does it mean to be a community, an authentic community that struggles for justice, full inclusion, where everybody matters? And that's the work we do.
This is a community that, Kirk, and your name is prophetic. Goodrich. I'm sure you've heard this before.
The Councilmember Barron, often refers to that, sometimes in a good way or bad way, but yeah, it works both ways.
You are a Goodrich. You are someone who, I was watching, said this is the community that you were raised in?
Yeah, not far. I'm from East Flatbush, which is next door to Brownsville.
Okay, so it's East New York. But people were not from New York. I was at the Daily News for 16 years. I remember there was a school shooting at Jefferson. I went out to cover that. That was in East New York.
Yes.
Brownsville area.
Right.
I did a piece on a young man from there, went to his house, and I was like, oh, yeah. So you referred to it, Pastor Brawley, as the murder capital of New York at the time. It was very tense. And I'm from Jersey. I feel like, parts of Newark are just, I'll have an argument with people worse than parts of Brooklyn. But we shouldn't even have that kind of conversation, right? But you being in the heart of a place that was tense, how did you navigate that with the community and give people respite and some sort of sanctuary?
I really appreciate your framing in terms of narrative and story, because stories shape reality. And that was the story of St. Paul, of East New York, of our community. It was called and dubbed the murder capital. But yet, there were great people living, making a living, trying to build community, living and doing life together. So St. Paul Community Baptist Church, along with other congregations, East Brooklyn congregations, came together to envision and imagine something different, something else, not to give into the prevailing thought that civilization, as a matter of fact, one elected official said that East New York was the beginning of the end of civilization. Our people changed that narrative.
That's what I wanted to talk about today, right? This is a road to freedom. As I imagine doing a town hall series like this, first I wanted to change the narrative around, when politicians come to talk to us, they're always talking about two things: poverty and criminal justice reform. Most of us are not poor. As a matter of fact, it's about 24% of black folk live in poverty. So that means 70-something% of us are not living in poverty. And most of us have never been in the criminal justice system. So why are those the only two things that you talk about? Yes, disproportionately, but talk about the system that created that disparate way in which we are engaged in this country. Don't come talking to us about it, because we didn't create that problem. So let's now start talking about how we take back our stories and take back our power and take our freedom. And you guys have done this, and it took 40 years, which also means that there's a patience with the vision. You can't just have a vision and say, So let's walk through the blueprint of how the Nehemiah Project manifested into $1 billion of wealth in the black community while all these other neighborhoods are gentrifying. You were like, no, we can have a haven right here with us, with the people who were here from the beginning. Talk about it. Okay. Yes, Mr. Goodrich.
So I think the point you just made, Karen, is really important to me. Growing up in the affordable housing world is what I studied. It's literally all I've done. There's a tension in the affordable housing world now.
No, I don't want to cut you off, but you just threw it out. Growing up in affordable housing.
Meaning
walk us through it. What did that look like for
me?
Young,
it
Kirk?
Was. I've said to Pastor and everybody that when I was a teenager, they broke ground on the first Nehemiah homes in '82. I was 14. My mom's coworker bought one of the early homes, and so I was aware of what it was before I knew it was a profession. Was able to study it as an undergrad, and then my first, in 1989, my capstone paper in my senior year was interviewing a guy named Ira Robbins, who was developing Nehemiah with East Brooklyn congregation. So literally, I've never wanted to be a fireman, a doctor. The only thing I ever wanted to do was to be involved in affordable housing, but not just to create a safety net for the poorest of the poor, but to create an elevator so that our folks could be upwardly mobile. And what I saw happening in Brownsville and East New York was a pathway to a better life. And so my colleagues and I in the affordable world often argue about this because folks tend to see black folks as clients and tenants. I see black folks growing up in a neighborhood where people worked and bought homes as folks who have the same aspirations that white folks have. They don't see us that way often. Even folks who are very liberal don't see us that way. And so from my perspective, the idea that affordable housing could be a vehicle for wealth creation is taboo to a lot of folks. But what I want to see, if somebody just wants to survive, I'm happy to help them just survive. But if they want to thrive, we have to be there to create that pathway for them.
Is part of it like the mantra, the language, affordable housing? When you hear affordable housing, folk I don't want it in my neighborhood.
Correct.
Dave Chappelle's gonna go. City, no. Steph Curry and them go, no, I don't want it not in my backyard, right? When you say affordable housing, there's a connotation and a stigma. Maybe we should just change the language. Maybe we should call it aspirational housing or, empowerment housing. I don't know, but affordable housing has a stigma to it that is hard to get people to see what you guys have created.
That's right. I think language matters. When I say I like elevators and not safety nets, the imagery is of people moving up. Often people use the term workforce housing. But I think the truth of the matter is when I was 20 and now I'm 55, I'm going on 55, when I think of who I'm working for, I think of the people who are working people who are the spine of the city. All those people who had to go to work during the pandemic who were considered essential, that's who I'm working for. So if you're a cop or a firefighter or a nurse or a garbage man or a construction worker, sanitation worker, if you have to go to work when the rest of us can work remotely, you're the spine of the city. And we have to make it our priority to make sure that you have a place that you can afford to rent and a home you can afford to buy. And that's what East Brooklyn congregations pioneered. The idea that we want to make sure people can own in the neighborhood they grew up in. Simple idea.
I also imagine, Mr. Goodrich, that you were working for your mother. You did this for your mother. It wasn't just some random folk.
Right. And people and people like her, right? It's sort of when you see people get up every day and go to work and take care of their families and save and watch their credit, we ought to give them the ability to own and build wealth, retire comfortably. And that's not a part of the paradigm. The political paradigm in the city is always serve the poorest of the poor, but there's no thought to helping people elevate.
Well, it's that welfare, it's the dependency.
Correct.
You cannot control people unless they're dependent upon you, right?
Correct.
So that's why this is the road to freedom. Let's talk about that a little bit, Pastor Brawley. As this project has now built out and people are owning homes and, you came in at what point in this, and then how did it expand to where it is now?
Yeah, I came into this understanding and reality in the early 90s when I became the assistant pastor at St. Paul. But I wanted to just, frame it this way. You mentioned earlier that elected officials come in with just two conversations, two bullet points. But there's so much more to our communities and so many more conversations we need to have. So how do those conversations actually happen? If we depend upon elected officials solely to frame all of our concerns and all the arguments, we have no say-so nor agency. What I love about this model called community organizing is that the people who are most affected have the opportunity to express what it is they want to see. Nothing about us without us becomes the mantra, right?
Yes.
And so Nehemiah, more than a housing effort, really started out as an opportunity for us to build power. And that began simply with people talking to each other. How revolutionary is that? People having a conversation, getting people into a room, having a one-on-one dialogue. What's happening in your world? What are you experiencing? And then coming to understand that there is a shared reality, that we have shared interests, shared self-interest, and that people having a will to act and do something about it. And I believe in this moment that we're losing a lot of that in this nation. Yeah. We really need to understand democracy in a broader sense of the people and from the people. And that happens when I believe people have an opportunity to express what it is they want and see for their community. Secondly, you talked about gentrification. There's another term I'd like to introduce, regenerate.
I like it.
Regeneration. Why don't we regenerate our communities? So, the framework here, the story, the context, 16 blocks, abandoned, burnt out. Nobody wanted these blocks. Not only did you not want to live there, Kirk Goodrich put it this way, people didn't even want to drive through there, right? Thanks. So you think about that. Who wanted this land? Nobody. But there were people who had imagination, creativity, and the ability to see what others could not see, built power to make it happen. And now we have a community that others now want to move into.
Yes, because the home values are now $500,000. So walk us through, because again, if you can't see a thing, you can't be a thing. If you can't see it in your mind's eye, for many people, and for Black folk in particular, there's always been kind of like the leader that would go and negotiate, as opposed to the people demanding. Politicians come, they tell us what they're going to do for us. We don't demand what it is that we actually need, which is why those two conversations end up happening, because yes, we abdicate our power to the people that actually are not empowered unless we vote for them, right? So walk us through 16 blocks abandoned all over the city, I imagine, all over the country. Baltimore, I know that there's places like that there. I know there's
yes,
places like that in parts of Virginia, North Carolina. I'm going down the Eastern Seaboard. Like, I know that there's 16 blocks abandoned in every single state where we live. What happened? How did this happen?
So it happened with conversations within our member institutions, right? East Brooklyn congregations, 40 or so institutions, people having conversations about what it is you want for your community.
And what did they say? And
the number one concern was affordable housing.
Okay. Meaning places that we can own and be able to afford to pay for. I mean, it's just that simple.
It's
right?
simple as that.
I go to work, I make $50,000 a year. If you're in New York, that's not any money if you make $50,000 in New York. So a mortgage should be, maybe $1,500, $2,000. People are paying $2,000 to rent a closet in New York City, to rent a closet.
$3,000.
$3,000, I'm sorry. And folk who are in other parts of the country can't even imagine a closet costing $3,000 a month.
Putting a pin in that, you say, go back and tell the story, but it's actually still the same story. So what I believe Nehemiah is, it bears witness to what's possible, but it's also bearing witness to what still needs to be done. We need tens of thousands. Kirk, I mean, you could speak to this in terms of the numbers, but we need thousands and thousands of Nehemiah projects throughout the country.
Absolutely. This is why we're having this conversation, because I think there's nothing new under the sun. This is a blueprint. Okay, 16 square blocks. You went to the mayor. At the time, it was it Koch? How am I doing? Anyway,
that's right.
It's inside.
That's right.
Yeah. So you negotiated with him. Then it was Giuliani, right? Because it's not about partisan politics. It's about power.
That's right.
Get what you need to get from whomever has the power to get it. How did you get the 16 square blocks, and then what did you do with it, Kirk? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, let me just add this. So it's about power. You just use that word. Well, how do you define power? Organized people and organized money, right? So, I mean, when you can get 500 people into a room, 5,000 people in a room, and summon an elected official and make a demand and say, this is what the people want, and expect an answer in the affirmative.
That's what happened.
That's what happens.
There's a I started my career doing organizing, and I was inspired by this model, which was pioneered by the Industrial Areas Foundation, Saul Alinsky in the 40s, and applied to church-based organizing. East Brooklyn Congregations is probably the best example of church-based organizing transforming a community in the history of our country, particularly as it relates to creating housing. And when I was 21, I went to an action, and to watch 2,500 people bend the will of an elected official is incredible. And once people get a taste of their own political power and ability to make change, they're unstoppable. And so the story of the last 40 years is in part about creating wealth through affordable housing, but the true story is regular people understanding their power and exercising it, when they needed to create the outcomes they wanted. What we have happening now in the city is a political drift to the left, introduction of socialism, the concept of social housing, and elected officials who don't personally subscribe to socialism because they're not giving up their wealth or participating. They and their families are fully participating in the capitalist system. They're simply creating an identity for themselves that's expedient politically. We need organizations and people who understand their power to craft different outcomes for our neighborhoods, to create wealth. That's one thing you can do, but the East Brooklyn Congregations folks created schools, safer streets,
I was gonna get into
better transportation.
Yes.
So whatever you need, you can't rely on your elected officials to do. You have to be the change agent.
How does a developer, president of Monadnock,
yes.
Monadnock, yes, I did it. Monadnock, I
You
get
got
it.
it.
Monadnock Development, Kirk Goodrich. I look at you and you say socialism, but aren't you a capitalist?
No. I'm not espousing it. I'm saying I am. I'm saying what I'm concerned about is that narrative is being provided as an alternative to the idea that black folks should want wealth. And I circulated an article to my colleagues and friends last week, and it was a podcast and a study done by Columbia University about the value of lost wages prior to 1865, the present value of it. And you may have seen that, Karen. And I said to someone yesterday, and it's in the trillions of dollars, and I said to someone yesterday, the wealth of this country is built on what they didn't pay people, and not only during slavery, but since then. Black and brown people never get paid what we're supposed to get paid, and that creates wealth for someone. So the idea that when you're in a position of power as an elected official, that particularly a black or brown elected official, and you're not actively looking for opportunities to create wealth among black people, black businesses, and black institutions, that's sort of like a dereliction of your duty. Like, we can do whatever economic system you want to do after we get what's coming to us.
Come on.
That's it.
Right.
But you'll never hear, what's fascinating to me is that's not the narrative. And it should be. And whether you're in the motion picture industry or in the culinary industry or in the affordable housing industry, if you're a person of color, your number one job should be to make sure we get what's coming to us, and then everything else is second. That's how I feel. And that position makes me dramatically different than anybody who in the affordable housing field at this point.
I love it. Kirk Goodrich, Pastor Brawley, David Brawley, St. Paul Community Baptist Church in Brooklyn, microcosm of what is possible. It's a small blip on what is possible across the globe, actually, because I think that this model can work everywhere. 16 square blocks, brought 2,100 people, got the politicians at the time, Koch and then Giuliani, to hand over the property, the land, for $1.
Right. So it's a combination of things. So it's the property for nominal value, $1 a lot. And then in addition to that, cash subsidy. So if it cost, $200,000 to build the home back in the late 90s or whatever it was, you then get a subsidy to reduce the price so that it's affordable to the people who are living in that area.
Okay, so let's take one parcel.
Okay.
All right. First home. Cost how much to build?
So I wasn't involved in Nehemiah back in the 80s, but
Right.
I think those early homes sold for like $42,000 or something like that.
$42,000 a person could purchase a home.
Back in the 80s.
Back in the
yes.
80s, 90s. When you guys got involved, what? Because I know
So
one,
I have the
one
price
family,
list in my pocket,
Yes, come
but
on. One family waited 7 years because there was a lottery. Because
It's changed over time, but in the late 90s there were homes that were 158,000 in the late 90s. We even had homes in our last group of homes, which the last one sold in December 21. A single family home was like 197,000
in New York.
500. Yes.
Okay, pause. When we come back, walk us through what that does to a family to be able to buy a home for $190-something thousand in New York City, one of the most expensive real estate cities in the world. And let's get some progress reports, too, of some of the people that purchased homes early and where they are now. Did they sell? What's happening? Blueprint. We're building it right here because we're building wealth. We're with, of course, Pastor David Brawley and Mr. Kirk Goodrich. We'll be right back.